The mare's hooves kicked up dust as Caroline Nash pulled hard on the reins, her heart sinking when she realized her coin purse held exactly $3.40, not nearly enough to buy passage on the westbound stage leaving Stillwater, Missouri in 20 minutes. The year was 1873, and the September heat bore down on her shoulders like a physical weight as she stood outside the Wells Fargo office, watching other passengers load their belongings onto the coach that represented her only chance at reaching her sister in California before winter made the journey impossible. "Miss, you boarding or not?" The driver, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained teeth, squinted at her from his perch. "Stage leaves in 15 minutes and I got a schedule to keep." Caroline's fingers tightened around the leather reins of her mare, Rosie, the only thing of value she owned besides the clothes on her back and her mother's wedding ring, which she would never part with. The horse had been her companion for 3 years, a gift from her father before he died, and the thought of selling her made Caroline's stomach twist. But her sister's letter had been desperate, written in a shaking hand that suggested illness or worse. Clara was all the family Caroline had left in this world. "How much for passage to Sacramento?" Caroline asked, though she already knew the answer would break her heart. $25, miss, and that is with you sleeping under the stars most nights and providing your own meals. $25 might as well have been $2,500. Caroline had spent the last of her savings burying her father and settling his debts, which turned out to be considerably more substantial than she had imagined. The small house they had rented in Stillwater had been claimed by the landlord the moment her father drew his last breath, and Caroline found herself with nowhere to go except west, to the sister she had not seen in 5 years. "I have a horse," Caroline said, her voice catching slightly. "A good mare, well-trained, only 6 years old, strong and healthy." The driver scratched his beard, then nodded toward the freight office next door. "Talk to Patterson. He buys horses for the freight company, might give you enough for passage." Caroline led Rosie to the freight office, her boots heavy as lead. The mare nickered softly, nuzzling Caroline's shoulder as if sensing her distress. Inside the dim office, a heavy-set man looked up from his ledger. "Help you? I need to sell my horse, for passage west." Patterson came outside, circled Rosie twice, checked her teeth, ran his hands down her legs. $26. It was exactly $1 more than she needed. Caroline felt tears prick her eyes but refused to let them fall. She was 22 years old, alone in the world, and she would not cry in front of strangers. "Done," she whispered. The transaction took 5 minutes. Patterson counted out the money, took Rosie's reins, and walked away without ceremony. Caroline stood frozen, watching her mare's tail swish as she disappeared around the corner of the building. Then she forced herself to move, walking back to the stage office, purchasing her ticket, and climbing aboard just as the driver cracked his whip. She did not look back at Stillwater. There was nothing left for her there. The coach lurched forward, and Caroline found herself squeezed between a portly woman who smelled of lavender water and a thin man who immediately fell asleep, his head lolling onto Caroline's shoulder until she elbowed him firmly away. Across from her sat a young couple whispering to each other, their faces full of hope and excitement about their new life out west. Caroline envied them that hope. They made camp that first night near a creek, and Caroline spread her bedroll away from the others, staring up at the stars and thinking about Rosie. Had Patterson fed her? Was she frightened, wondering why Caroline had abandoned her? The guilt sat like a stone in Caroline's chest. "First time traveling alone, miss?" Caroline turned to find a woman settling onto the ground nearby, older than Caroline by perhaps a decade, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled into a practical bun. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who has done it herself. I'm Margaret Foster. Heading to meet my brother in Denver. Caroline Nash. Going to Sacramento to help my sister. They talked quietly while the other passengers settled in, and Margaret's steady presence eased some of Caroline's loneliness. When they finally lay down to sleep, Caroline felt marginally less alone in the world. The second day brought them to a small settlement where they changed horses and took on supplies. Caroline stood near the corral, watching the stage company's horses mill about, and for a moment she thought she saw Rosie among them. Her heart leaped, but it was just a similar mare, not quite the same color. Of course Rosie was not here. Patterson had bought her for the freight company back in Stillwater. She is a beauty, that one, a voice said beside her. Caroline turned to find a cowboy leaning against the corral fence, his hat tipped back to reveal sun-bronzed features and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He was tall, built lean and strong, probably in his mid-20s, with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. His shirt was dusty from the trail, and a red bandana hung loose around his neck. Which one? Caroline asked, though she knew exactly which horse he meant, the one that reminded her of Rosie. The bay mare. Good lines, strong chest. Someone took care of her. He glanced at Caroline and something in his expression shifted. You look like someone who knows horses. I had one. Had to sell her for stage fare. The words came out more bitter than Caroline intended, and she immediately regretted sharing personal information with a stranger. But the cowboy just nodded sympathetically. Hard thing, giving up a good horse. They are more than transportation, especially out here. They are partners. He extended a hand. Reed Lawrence. I work for the Harrison Ranch, driving cattle mostly, but I help with horse buying too. Caroline shook his hand, noting the calluses and the firm grip. Caroline Nash. Just passing through. Heading west on the stage, Sacramento. My sister needs help. Reed nodded, studying her face in a way that made Caroline simultaneously self-conscious and oddly warm. There was nothing improper in his gaze, just genuine interest and what seemed like concern. Long journey for a woman alone. You got people meeting you in Sacramento, my sister. Caroline did not mention that Clara's letter had been worrying, that she had no idea what situation she was walking into, or that she had approximately $1.40 left to her name after purchasing some food supplies for the journey. All aboard. The driver called, and Caroline turned away from the corral, aware of Reed's eyes following her as she climbed back into the coach. They traveled 4 more days, the landscape growing wilder and more beautiful as they moved west. Caroline found herself thinking about the cowboy more than she cared to admit, remembering the way his eyes had softened when she mentioned selling Rosie, the genuine concern in his voice. She told herself it meant nothing, that she would never see him again, but his face appeared in her mind as she tried to sleep under the stars each night. On the 6th day, disaster struck. They were crossing a particularly rough stretch of terrain when the stage hit a hidden rock, and the front axle cracked with a sound like a gunshot. The coach lurched violently to one side, throwing passengers against each other. Caroline's head struck the door frame, and stars exploded across her vision. When the world stopped spinning, she found herself on the ground outside the coach with no clear memory of how she had gotten there. "Everyone out," the driver shouted. "Need to assess the damage." The axle was broken clean through, and the nearest town with a wheelwright was 2 days back the way they had come. The driver swore creatively for several minutes while the passengers stood in the blazing sun, looking at each other helplessly. "We can send someone back for parts," the driver finally said. "But you all will be camping here for 3, maybe 4 days while we get this fixed." Anyone who wants to ride back can, but you will have to wait there and catch the next stage through, which is not for 2 weeks." Caroline's heart sank. For days here meant at least a week's delay reaching Clara, possibly more, and her meager supplies would never stretch that far. She had planned to find work immediately upon reaching Sacramento, using her $1 to tide her over until then. Now she would arrive with nothing. "There's a ranch about 10 miles north of here," one of the male passengers said, pointing. "I saw it marked on my map. Maybe they would sell us some supplies." The driver shook his head. "I cannot leave the stage unguarded, and I need at least 2 men here to help with repairs once the parts arrive. Any volunteers to ride for supplies?" Caroline stepped forward before she could think better of it. "I will go. I know how to ride, and I know what supplies we need." "You need a horse for that, miss, and we cannot spare one of the stage horses. Need them rested for when we get moving again." "I will walk then. 10 miles is not impossible." Margaret Foster grabbed Caroline's arm. "In this heat, you will collapse before you get halfway there." "I have to do something. I cannot just sit here for 4 days eating nothing while my sister waits for me." Caroline heard the desperation in her own voice and hated it, but she was too worried to care about pride. "Nobody's walking anywhere," a new voice said, and Caroline turned to see a rider approaching from the west, leading a pack-horse. As he drew closer, her heart gave an odd jump. Reed Lawrence sat astride a handsome buckskin, looking as surprised to see her as she was to see him. "Mr. Lawrence," Caroline said, proud that her voice remained steady. "Miss Nash." Reed dismounted, taking in the broken stage and stranded passengers with a practiced eye. "Looks like you folks hit some trouble." The driver explained the situation, and Reed listened quietly, his expression thoughtful. When the driver finished, Reed glanced at Caroline. "You are going to walk 10 miles in this heat for supplies. Someone has to." "She is foolish," Margaret interjected, "but determined." Reed's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "I am heading to the Harrison Ranch anyway, which is about 15 miles northeast of here. I can take someone with me, get supplies, and bring them back. Be faster on horseback, and the ranch hands know me, so they will not overcharge." "I will go," Caroline said immediately. "Miss Nash, you cannot go alone with a man you barely know," Margaret protested, though her tone suggested she thought Reed trustworthy enough. "I can ride double with Mr. Lawrence to the ranch, help purchase appropriate supplies, and return. I grew up on a small farm. I know what is needed for camping. And honestly, what choice do we have?" Caroline looked at Reed. "Unless you think I would slow you down." Reed studied her for a long moment, and Caroline had the unsettling feeling he was seeing far more than she intended to reveal. Finally, he nodded. "You can ride with me, but it will be hard traveling, and we will need to camp at least 1 night on the trail. Your reputation might suffer." "My reputation is the least of my worries right now, Mr. Lawrence. My sister is ill in Sacramento. I am stranded in the middle of nowhere, and I have $1 to my name. I think my reputation can withstand a supply run." Something flickered in Reed's eyes, respect maybe, or understanding. He turned to the driver. "Give me a list of what you need, and we will head out within the hour. Should be back in 3 days, maybe sooner if we push." The arrangements were made quickly. Caroline transferred her few belongings into a small bag that would fit on Reed's pack-horse, said goodbye to Margaret, and found herself settling onto the buckskin behind Reed, acutely aware of how close she had to sit to avoid falling off. "Hold on to my waist," Reed said matter-of-factly. "This is not a pleasure ride. The terrain gets rough about 5 miles out, and I need to move fast." Caroline wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the solid warmth of him through his shirt. Her face heated, but she forced herself to focus on the practical aspects of the situation. This was about survival and helping Clara, nothing more. Reed set a brisk pace, and Caroline concentrated on moving with the horse's rhythm, the way her father had taught her years ago. The sun beat down mercilessly, and she was grateful when Reed stopped after 2 hours to water the horses and let everyone rest. "You ride well," Reed said, offering her his canteen. "Better than most women I know. My father bred horses before we lost everything. I practically grew up in the saddle." Caroline drank deeply, then handed back the canteen. "How much farther to where we will camp?" "Another 3 hours. There is a good spot with water and some shade. We will rest there tonight, then push hard for the ranch tomorrow morning." They rode in companionable silence for a while, and Caroline found herself relaxing despite the circumstances. Reed handled his horse with easy skill, and he seemed to know exactly where he was going, never hesitating at forks in the barely visible trail. "Can I ask you something?" Reed said eventually. "I suppose. Why were you really going to walk 10 miles in this heat? It is not just about supplies, is it?" Caroline considered lying, then decided there was no point. She would probably never see this man again after he delivered her back to the stage, so what did it matter if he knew the truth? "My sister's letter said she was ill. It arrived 3 weeks ago, and the journey was supposed to take 2 weeks. Every day I am delayed is another day she suffers alone. I cannot just sit there doing nothing while she waits for me." Reed was quiet for a moment. "You are a good sister." "I am all she has, and she is all I have." "What about the rest of your family? Dead? Father died 2 months ago, mother 3 years before that. Clara married and moved to California 5 years back, and I have not seen her since. Now her husband is apparently gone, prospecting somewhere up north, and she is alone with a baby and no money." Caroline stopped, surprised at how much she had revealed. "I am sorry. You did not ask for my life story." "I do not mind listening." Reed's voice was gentle. "Sounds like you have had a hard time of it lately." "No harder than most people, I imagine. The world is full of sad stories. That does not make yours any less sad or any less important." The simple kindness in his words made Caroline's throat tight. She blinked hard against the sting of tears, grateful Reed could not see her face. When had someone last spoken to her with such uncomplicated compassion? Her father, maybe, before the illness took him. Everyone else in Stillwater had kept their distance once the creditors started circling, as if poverty might be contagious. They reached the camping spot as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Reed helped Caroline down from the horse, his hands steady on her waist, and for a moment they stood close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his green eyes. Then he stepped back, suddenly busy with unsaddling the horses. "I will get a fire going," Caroline said, needing something to do with her hands. "And I can cook if you have supplies. I have some salt pork and beans and coffee. Nothing fancy, but it is filling." They worked together with the easy coordination of people accustomed to making camp. Reed tended the horses while Caroline built the fire and started preparing their simple meal. The sky darkened to indigo, and stars began appearing one by one, so many more than Caroline had ever seen in town. "Tell me about your horse," Reed said once they were seated by the fire, eating beans from tin plates. "The one you sold." Caroline smiled despite herself. "Rosie. My father gave her to me on my 19th birthday. She was half wild then, a 3-year-old who had barely been handled. Father said if I could train her, she was mine. And you did. It took 6 months, but yes, she was the smartest horse I ever worked with and loyal. She would come when I called, even from across a field, and gentle, so gentle. I could do anything with her." Caroline's smile faded. "Selling her felt like betraying a friend." Reed was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. What did the buyer look like? The man who bought her, heavy-set, middle-aged, named Patterson. He bought horses for the freight company in Stillwater. Reed nodded slowly, and something in his expression made Caroline's heart skip. What is it? Might be nothing. But I was in Stillwater 2 weeks ago buying horses for the Harrison Ranch. Bought several from a freight company there, dealing with a man named Patterson. Caroline's hands tightened on her plate. You were there 2 weeks ago, but I sold Rosie 6 days ago. I was back through there 6 days ago too, picking up the horses I bought, bringing them west to the ranch. Reed met her eyes across the fire. One of them was a bay mare, 6 years old, excellent conformation, smart as a whip and already responding to voice commands after just a few days. I paid top dollar for her because she was the finest horse in the lot. The beans turned to ash in Caroline's mouth. Rosie. Could be. Bay mare with a white star on her forehead and one white sock on her back left leg. Caroline could barely breathe. Yes, that is her. She is at the Harrison Ranch right now. I was riding back from delivering her when I came across your stranded stage. The world seemed to tilt sideways. Rosie was not lost to her forever, sold to some stranger who would never appreciate her. She was at her ranch just 15 miles away, under the care of a man who clearly knew horses and treated them well. Is she all right? Caroline whispered. She is perfect. Like I said, smartest horse I have worked with in years. The ranch owner, Mr. Harrison, already has buyers interested, but I have not committed to anyone yet. She is too valuable to sell to just anyone. How much? The words burst from Caroline before she could stop them. How much would Mr. Harrison sell her for? Reed's expression was kind but firm. $50. She is worth every penny, but I know that is not money you have. $50. It might as well have been $500. Even if Caroline found work immediately upon reaching Sacramento, it would take her months to save that much while supporting herself and helping Clara. By then, Rosie would be long sold. Of course, Caroline said, trying to keep the devastation from her voice. That is a fair price for a good horse. They finished eating in silence, and Caroline helped clean up, grateful for something to occupy her hands. When Reed spread out their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire, maintaining proper distance, Caroline lay down and stared at the stars, her mind spinning. Rosie was so close, just 15 miles away. Caroline could see her tomorrow if they reached the ranch. She could at least say goodbye properly, let Rosie know she had not been abandoned. It was more than Caroline had dared hope for 6 days ago. Miss Nash, Reed's voice came softly across the fire. You still awake? Yes. I know it is not much consolation, but I promise I will make sure Rosie goes to a good home, someone who will appreciate her and treat her right. Thank you, Caroline managed. That does help, actually, knowing she is in good hands. She heard Reed shift in his bedroll. For what it is worth, I think you made an incredibly brave choice selling your horse to reach your sister. A lot of people would not have that kind of courage or that kind of love. Caroline's eyes burned with unshed tears. It does not feel brave. It feels like I failed her. You did not fail anyone. You made an impossible choice in an impossible situation. That is just life sometimes. They fell silent after that, and eventually Caroline drifted into restless sleep, dreaming of Rosie running free across an endless prairie, always just out of reach. She woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Reed moving around the camp. The sun was barely above the horizon, painting everything in soft pink light. Caroline sat up, her muscles stiff from sleeping on the ground, and gratefully accepted the cup of coffee Reed offered. We will reach the ranch by midday if we make good time, Reed said. I will introduce you to Mr. Harrison and his wife. They are good people, and Ruth Harrison will probably insist on feeding you a proper meal." "That sounds wonderful, actually." They broke camp efficiently and were on the trail within the hour. As they rode, Reed pointed out landmarks and told her stories about the area. He had grown up in Texas, he said, learning cattle work from his father before striking out on his own at 18. He had worked ranches all over the West, finally settling at the Harrison place 3 years ago. "It is the best outfit I have ever worked for," Reed said. "Mr. Harrison treats his men fairly, pays on time, and actually listens when you have ideas. And Miss Ruth, well, she is like a mother to all of us, always making sure we are fed and mended." "Sounds like you found a good home," Caroline said, trying not to feel envious. "I did, and they are always looking for help, actually. Miss Ruth has been saying she needs someone to help with the house and the garden. The ranch is growing, and she cannot keep up with everything herself anymore." Caroline's heart gave a little leap of hope, but she forced it down. "I cannot stay. I have to get to my sister." "I know. I just thought I would mention it, in case you know anyone looking for work out this way." They crested a ridge, and Reed pointed down into a green valley below. "There it is, Harrison Ranch." The ranch was larger than Caroline expected, with a sprawling main house, several outbuildings, and extensive corrals. Cattle dotted the hillsides, and she could see several men working with horses in one of the corrals. It looked prosperous and well-maintained, the kind of place that spoke of hard work and careful management. As they rode down into the valley, Caroline felt her heart beating faster. Rosie was here somewhere. In just a few minutes, she would see her horse again. A woman emerged from the main house as they approached, shading her eyes against the sun. She was perhaps 50, with gray-streaked brown hair and the sturdy build of someone accustomed to hard work. Her face lit up when she saw Reed. "Reed Lawrence, I was starting to worry about you." She hurried forward as Reed dismounted, and Caroline slid down as well, her legs wobbly from the long ride. "You said 3 days, and it has been 5. Sorry, Miss Ruth. Ran into some complications." Reed turned to Caroline. "This is Miss Caroline Nash. Her stage broke down, and we need supplies for the stranded passengers. Caroline, this is Ruth Harrison, the finest cook in 3 counties and the real boss of this ranch." Ruth swatted at Reed playfully, but her eyes were assessing Caroline with the shrewd gaze of a woman who missed nothing. "Pleased to meet you, dear. You look half-starved and completely exhausted. Come inside and I will get you fed while Reed handles the supply arrangements." "I should help with the supplies," Caroline protested. "You can help by telling me exactly what you need while you eat. I will not have guests in my home going hungry, and you look like you have not had a decent meal in days." Ruth's tone brooked no argument, and Caroline found herself ushered into the house before she could protest further. The interior was cool and spotless, with simple but comfortable furnishings and the lingering smell of fresh bread. Ruth sat Caroline at a large kitchen table and immediately began assembling a plate of food: cold roast beef, fresh bread, butter, cheese, and pickled vegetables. "Now then, tell me about these supplies you need while you eat," Ruth commanded, settling into a chair with her own cup of coffee. Caroline explained the situation between bites of the best food she had tasted in weeks. Ruth listened carefully, occasionally making notes on a scrap of paper, nodding at Caroline's suggestions. "You clearly know what you are doing," Ruth observed. "Worked on a farm, did you?" "My father bred horses. I helped him with everything until he died 2 months ago." "I am sorry for your loss, dear. And now you are heading west to help your sister, if I ever get there. The stage breaking down was just the latest disaster in a series of them." Ruth reached across the table and patted Caroline's hand. "Well, You are safe here for now, and we will get your stage fixed up and moving again. Sometimes the Lord slows us down for a reason, though we cannot always see it at the time." A commotion outside made both women look toward the door. Through the window, Caroline could see Reed leading a horse into the yard, and her heart stopped. Even from this distance, she recognized Rosie's distinctive gait, the way she held her head. Caroline was out of her chair and through the door before she consciously decided to move. She ran across the yard, and Rosie's head came up immediately, ears pricking forward. The mare whinnied, a sound of pure joy, and then Caroline was there, her arms around Rosie's neck, breathing in the familiar smell of horse and leather and home. "I am so sorry," Caroline whispered into Rosie's mane. "I am so sorry." Rosie nuzzled her shoulder, nickering softly, and Caroline felt tears streaming down her face. She had told herself she was fine with selling Rosie, that it was necessary that she would move on. But holding her horse again, feeling that familiar warmth and affection, Caroline realized how much she had been lying to herself. Losing Rosie had broken something inside her. "I wondered if she was yours." Reed's voice was gentle. "The way you described her, I thought maybe. And when we got here, I wanted you to see her again, at least to say goodbye properly." Caroline looked up at him, this cowboy she barely knew who had somehow given her the most precious gift imaginable. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with tears. "You have no idea what this means." "I think I do, actually." Reed's expression was soft, understanding. A good horse is never just a horse. She is a friend, a partner. Losing her is like losing part of yourself. Ruth had followed Caroline outside and now stood watching the reunion with suspicion bright in her eyes. "Reed Lawrence, did you know this was her horse when you bought it?" "No, madam, just coincidence. But a lucky one, I think." Ruth did not sound convinced, but she smiled at Caroline. "Well, you take all the time you need with her, dear. We have plenty of daylight left for supply arrangements." Caroline spent the next hour with Rosie, grooming her, checking her over for any injuries or problems, talking to her in the low, soothing voice Rosie had always responded to. The mare was in perfect condition, sleek and healthy and clearly well cared for. Reed's work, Caroline realized. He had not just bought Rosie as stock, he had treated her like the valuable animal she was. Finally, reluctantly, Caroline gave Rosie one last hug and walked back to the house, where Ruth had the supplies ready and Reed was loading them onto the pack horse. "I added some extra food," Ruth said. "No charge. Call it Christian charity for stranded travelers." "That is very kind of you, Mrs. Harrison." "Ruth, please. And it is no hardship. We have plenty and you folks need it more." She paused, studying Caroline's face. "Reed mentioned you might know someone looking for work. He said you needed help with the house and garden, but I am afraid I cannot stay." "My sister needs me in Sacramento." Ruth nodded slowly. "Of course. But if your situation changes, the offer stands. We could use a woman who knows her way around a ranch and is not afraid of hard work." They set out again after a quick lunch, the pack horse laden with supplies. Caroline looked back once, hoping to catch another glimpse of Rosie, but the mare was back in the corral. Out of sight but no longer gone from her life completely. At least Caroline knew where she was now, knew she was safe and well cared for. The ride back to the stage seemed faster, maybe because Caroline's heart felt lighter despite everything. Reed seemed content with silence, occasionally pointing out wildlife or interesting rock formations, but mostly just letting Caroline exist with her own thoughts. As the sun began to set, Reed spoke up. "We will camp soon, then reach your stage by tomorrow afternoon. Should give the driver time to make repairs once the parts arrive." "Reed," Caroline said impulsively, "why did you really bring me to the ranch? You could have handled the supplies yourself. It would have been faster without me. Reed was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, when you said you were going to walk 10 miles in that heat, something about it reminded me of my sister. She passed away 4 years ago, and she had that same stubborn determination, that refusal to give up no matter what. I could not leave you there, could not let you do something that foolish and brave. And when I realized that bay mare might be your Rosie, I wanted you to see her again, to have that closure at least. I am sorry about your sister. Cholera took her and her whole family. Sometimes the world is just cruel for no reason. Reed's voice was rough with old grief. But sometimes it gives you small mercies too, like bringing you and your horse together one more time. They made camp as full darkness fell, and this time the silence between them felt different, weighted with things unspoken. Caroline lay in her bedroll, listening to the crackling fire and thinking about Reed's kindness, about how strange it was that a man she barely knew had shown her more compassion than anyone in Stillwater had in months. "Reed," she said softly, "are you asleep?" "No." "Why did you really buy Rosie? You said Mr. Harrison wanted horses, but you paid top dollar for her. There must have been cheaper options." She heard Reed shift, saw him prop himself up on one elbow across the fire. The flickering light cast shadows across his face, making him look mysterious and somehow vulnerable at the same time. "Because I could see she was special, even before I knew she was yours. The way she moved, the intelligence in her eyes. I have been working with horses my whole life, and every once in a while you meet one that is different, one that understands things beyond the basics of training. Rosie is one of those horses." He paused, "and maybe part of me knew she meant something to someone. You can tell when a horse has been loved when she is looking for her person." Rosie kept watching the road like she was waiting for someone to come back for her. Caroline's throat tightened. "She was waiting for me. I know that now. And Caroline, I want you to know that I am not going to sell her. Not yet. I will tell Mr. Harrison we are holding her back for special breeding stock or something. That way, if you ever find yourself in a position to buy her back, she will still be available. Reed, you cannot do that. You said there are already buyers interested, and I have no idea when or if I will ever have $50. Then I will wait until you do, or until I can figure out something else." His voice was firm, decided. "Some things are worth waiting for, Caroline. And reuniting a woman with her horse seems like one of them." Caroline felt tears sliding down her temples into her hair. "I do not understand why you are being so kind to me. You do not even know me." Reed was quiet for so long that Caroline thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Maybe I want to know you. Maybe when I saw you standing by that corral, looking like your heart was breaking, I felt something I have not felt in a long time. And maybe when you wrapped your arms around your horse today and cried like she was a lost child come home, I realized that you are exactly the kind of person I want in my life. Strong and loyal and willing to sacrifice everything for the people you love." Caroline's heart was pounding so hard she was sure Reed must be able to hear it across the fire. "I have to go to my sister. I cannot stay, Reed, no matter how I might feel. I know, and I am not asking you to. I am just telling you the truth, and the truth is that I have not been able to stop thinking about you since I saw you at that stage station. And now that I know you, now that I have seen your courage and your kindness, I think I would wait a lifetime if that is what it took." "You barely know me," Caroline protested weakly. "I know enough. I know you sold everything you had to help your sister. I know you were willing to walk 10 miles in blazing heat for strangers who needed supplies. I know you trained a half-wild horse with patience and love. I know you cry for the things you lose, but you keep moving forward anyway." Reed sat up fully, his eyes finding hers across the fire. "I know enough to know I want to know more. I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything right now. Just know that when you are ready, when your sister is taken care of, and you figure out what comes next in your life, there is a place for you here, with Rosie, and with me, if you will have me." Caroline sat up too, her heart full of emotions she could not name. "Reed Lawrence, you are either the kindest man I have ever met or the craziest. Maybe both." He smiled, and even in the dim firelight, Caroline could see the warmth in his expression. "Get some sleep, Caroline. Tomorrow will be another long day." But Caroline lay awake for hours, staring at the stars and thinking about Reed's words, about the impossible hope blooming in her chest despite all her attempts to suppress it. She had to get to Clara. That had not changed. But maybe, just maybe, there was something waiting for her after that. Something worth coming back for. They reached the stranded stage the next afternoon to find that the repair parts had arrived, and the driver was already hard at work fixing the broken axle. Margaret rushed over to greet Caroline, relief clear on her face. "Thank goodness. I was so worried about you, traveling alone with a strange man." "Mr. Lawrence was a perfect gentleman," Caroline assured her, very aware of Reed unloading supplies nearby. "And we got everything the driver requested." The repairs took another day, during which Reed stayed with the group, helping the driver and teaching some of the male passengers how to handle basic wagon repairs. Caroline watched him work, noting how patient he was with the inexperienced men, how he never made them feel foolish for not knowing things he considered basic knowledge. "He is a good man," Margaret observed, following Caroline's gaze. "And he looks at you like you hung the moon." "He is kind, that is all. I am just another person who needed help." "Oh, honey, you do not really believe that, do you?" Margaret's expression was knowing. "I have been married 20 years and I know that look. That man is halfway in love with you already. That is impossible. We have known each other for barely 3 days. Time does not matter much when it comes to matters of the heart. Sometimes you just know." Caroline wanted to argue, but she thought about Reed's words by the campfire, about the way her heart had lifted when she saw him ride up to the broken stage, about how right it had felt to hold on to him as they rode. Maybe Margaret was right. Maybe time did not matter as much as she thought. The stage was repaired by late afternoon, and the driver announced they would leave at first light. Reed sought Caroline out as she was repacking her small bag. "So this is goodbye," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "For now." Caroline met his eyes, saw hope and worry warring in their green depths. "Reed, I have to go to my sister. I cannot abandon her. I know. I would not ask you to." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is a map to the Harrison Ranch with the address written out. And I wrote down how to send a telegram to the nearest town. When you get settled in Sacramento, when you know what your situation is, will you write to me?" Caroline took the paper, their fingers brushing, and felt that now familiar warmth spread through her chest. "I will write, I promise." "And Caroline," Reed stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth in the cooling evening air. "I meant what I said. I will wait. However long it takes, I will wait." Before Caroline could respond, before she could think about all the reasons this was impossible, Reed leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle, tentative, asking rather than demanding. And Caroline, who had never been kissed by a man she actually cared about, felt her entire world shift and settle into a new configuration. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling his heart racing under her palms. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Reed rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to buy Rosie back from Mr. Harrison, officially with my own money. and I am going to keep her safe until you can come back for her, for both of us. Reed, you cannot spend your savings on my horse. Watch me." He stepped back, his expression determined. "Some things are worth every penny, Caroline Nash, and you are one of them." The stage left at dawn, and Caroline watched through the window until Reed was just a speck in the distance, then nothing at all. She pressed his map against her chest and allowed herself, for just a moment, to imagine a different future. One where she did not have to choose between duty and desire. One where she could help Clara and still find her way back to the cowboy who had, impossibly, stolen her heart in less than a week. The remaining journey to Sacramento took another 2 weeks, long days of dust and discomfort punctuated by brief stops in small towns. Caroline thought about Reed constantly, remembering the way he smiled, the kindness in his voice, the feeling of his lips on hers. She pulled out his map every night, tracing the route from Sacramento back east to the Harrison Ranch, calculating distances and expenses in her head. When the stage finally rolled into Sacramento, Caroline felt a mix of relief and trepidation. She found Clara's address and hired a boy to carry her bag there, too exhausted and worried to care about the expense of 10 cents. Clara's home turned out to be a single room above a laundry, reached by a narrow staircase that creaked ominously under Caroline's feet. She knocked, and after a long moment, the door opened to reveal her sister. Caroline barely recognized her. Clara had always been plump and rosy, full of energy and laughter. The woman standing in the doorway was thin to the point of gauntness, her face pale and drawn, her hair hanging limp around her shoulders. But her eyes lit up when she saw Caroline, and she let out a sob of pure relief. "Carrie." "Oh, thank God, I was so afraid you would not come." Caroline embraced her sister, shocked at how fragile she felt, like she might break with too much pressure. "Of course I came. I am here now and everything is going to be all right." Inside the single room, Caroline found her 10-month-old nephew, James, sleeping fitfully in a small crib. The baby was thin too, though not dangerously so, and he seemed healthy enough. Clara collapsed onto the narrow bed that took up most of the room, and Caroline immediately went into action, assessing the situation with the practical eye she had developed managing her father's household. "When did you last eat?" Caroline asked. "Yesterday morning, I think. Or maybe the day before. I have been giving most of my food to Jamie." Clara's voice was weak. "My husband, Thomas, he left 3 months ago to prospect for gold up north. Said he would send money, but I have not heard from him. I have been doing laundry to earn money, but I got sick 2 weeks ago, and I could not work, and the rent is overdue, and I thought we were going to end up on the street." Caroline felt fury rising in her chest at this Thomas who had abandoned his wife and child, but she pushed it down. Anger would not help Clara right now. "All right. Here is what we are going to do. I am going to go buy food and medicine. Then I am going to find work and we are going to get you healthy again. We will figure out the rest as we go. Carrie, I have been looking for work for months. There is nothing. Then I will find something others missed. But first, food and rest." Caroline left Clara sleeping and went in search of the nearest general store, spending the last of her money on bread, cheese, eggs, milk, and some basic medicine. It left her with exactly 35 cents, but Clara and Jamie needed food more than Caroline needed security. Back at the tiny room, Caroline made eggs and toast, forcing Clara to eat while she fed Jamie some milk and bread softened in water. The baby was fussy but not seriously ill, just hungry and picking up on his mother's distress. Caroline held him, rocking and humming until he finally settled into proper sleep. "You are a natural," Clara said, her voice stronger after eating. "You will make a wonderful mother someday." Caroline thought of Reed and felt her face heat. I need to find work first. Tell me about the area. What kinds of jobs are available?" They talked late into the night, and Caroline learned that Sacramento was booming with the railroad expansion, but most of the work was for men. Women could find jobs in laundries as seamstresses or in the growing number of hotels and restaurants, but these positions were highly sought after and difficult to secure. "What about working with horses?" Caroline asked. "There must be stables, freight companies." Clara shook her head. "All men's work. No one would hire a woman for that." But Caroline was not ready to give up. The next morning, she left Clara and Jamie with enough food for the day and set out to explore Sacramento, looking for opportunities. She visited every stable, every freight company, every ranch on the outskirts of town. And at every stop, she was told the same thing. They did not hire women for horse work. Frustrated but not defeated, Caroline changed tactics. She found work at a restaurant, washing dishes for 75 cents a day. It was exhausting, dirty work, but it was income. She also took in mending in the evenings, her nimble fingers earning a few extra cents here and there. Slowly, painfully slowly, Clara began to recover. With regular food and rest, color returned to her cheeks, and she was able to resume some laundry work. Between the two of them, they managed to pay the rent and keep food on the table, though there was never anything extra. 3 weeks after arriving in Sacramento, Caroline finally had a moment to herself. She pulled out Reed's map, now creased and worn from constant handling, and wrote him a letter. "Dear Reed, I arrived safely in Sacramento and found my sister Clara in worse condition than I feared, but she is recovering now. We are managing, barely, but managing nonetheless. My nephew James is a sweet baby, and I am grateful to be here helping them. I think about Rosie every day and about you. I hope you have not tired of waiting for a foolish woman who cannot seem to get her life in order. I am working as much as I can, trying to save money, but Sacramento is expensive, and there never seems to be anything left over. I miss you." Is that strange to say about someone I knew for only a few days? But I do. I miss talking to you, miss the way you made me feel like anything was possible. Here, everything feels hard and uncertain. But then I remember your kindness, and it gives me strength to keep going. Please tell Rosie I have not forgotten her, and please do not forget about me. Yours, Caroline. She sent the letter, using precious pennies for postage, and tried not to hope too hard for a response. Reed's reply came 3 weeks later, and Caroline's hands shook as she opened it. "Dear Caroline, your letter was the best thing that has happened to me since you left. I was starting to worry I had dreamed our whole encounter, that maybe you were not real at all. But you are real, and you are brave, and you are doing exactly what you should be doing, taking care of your family. Rosie is well and officially mine now. I bought her from Mr. Harrison, and she lives in the pasture closest to the house where I can see her every day. I swear she still watches the road sometimes, like she is waiting for you to come back. Ruth Harrison asks about you constantly. I might have told her more than I should have about my feelings for you, and now she has adopted you as a project, even though you are hundreds of miles away. She says to tell you the job offer still stands, and also that any woman who can capture my heart so thoroughly must be someone special. Caroline, I know you are needed where you are. I am not asking you to leave your sister, but I want you to know that I am still here, still waiting. If you can ever come back, even for a visit, I will be ready with Rosie and a heart that has not stopped thinking about you for a single day. Save your money for yourself and your family. I am including $25 in this letter. Before you protest, know that this is not charity. Consider it payment for the time you spent helping with those stranded passengers, or payment for future work on the ranch if you ever come back, or just a gift from someone who cares about you. Use it however you need. Yours always, Reed. Caroline stared at the $25 tucked into the envelope, tears streaming down her face. $25. Half of what Rosie had cost, half of what Caroline would need to buy her back. But also enough to keep Clara and Jamie fed for 2 months, or to pay rent for that long, or to buy medicine if Clara got sick again. "What is wrong?" Clara asked, seeing Caroline's tears. "Nothing is wrong. Everything is right, maybe for the first time in months." Caroline showed her the letter and the money. "Clara, I need to tell you about Reed." She told her sister everything. About selling Rosie, about the broken stage, about Reed's impossible kindness and the way he made her feel like she could be more than just a woman struggling to survive. Clara listened, her eyes growing wider. "He sent you $25. Carrie, this man is in love with you. I barely know him. You know enough, and he knows you well enough to know you needed help but were too proud to ask for it. That is worth more than all the time in the world." Clara grabbed Caroline's hands. "You have to go back to him." "I cannot leave you and Jamie." "Thomas came back." Clara's voice was quiet. "Last week. I did not tell you because I was ashamed." Caroline felt cold dread wash over her. "What happened?" "He found no gold, lost everything he had. He is working at the docks now, barely making enough for us to survive. But Carrie, he came back. He was wrong to leave and we have a lot to work through, but he is trying. And he can support us barely, but enough." "Clara, are you sure? After he abandoned you?" "I am not saying I have forgiven him yet. But he is Jamie's father and he is genuinely remorseful. And Carrie, I do not want you to sacrifice your happiness for me. You have done enough. You saved us when we needed it most, but now it is time for you to save yourself." Caroline looked at the letter, at Reed's careful handwriting, at the money that represented not just financial help but faith in her, in their future. "I do not even know if he is serious. Maybe he has changed his mind by now. Then write to him. Tell him you are coming. And if he has changed his mind, which I doubt, then you will stay and work at the Harrison Ranch anyway. Ruth clearly wants to hire you, and you will be doing work you love with horses. Either way, you win." It took Caroline another month to make sure Clara and Thomas were truly stable, that their reconciliation was real and lasting. Thomas worked hard to prove himself, and slowly Caroline saw her sister's forgiveness growing. The man was genuinely remorseful and committed to making amends. Finally, Caroline wrote to Reed, "Dear Reed, if your offer still stands, I would like to accept the job at the Harrison Ranch. My sister is recovered and reunited with her husband, and I find myself free to make my own choices for the first time in a very long time. I have saved some money, though not nearly enough to buy Rosie back yet, but I can work for it, and I can be near her while I do. And Reed, if you meant what you said by that campfire, if you truly want to get to know me better, then I want that too. I want it so much it frightens me. I should arrive in approximately 3 weeks. I will take the stage to the nearest town and then hire a horse or walk the rest of the way to the ranch. I am coming back to you, Reed Lawrence, if you will still have me. Yours, Caroline." She sent the letter and used most of her savings to buy stage passage, keeping just enough for emergencies. Clara cried when Caroline left, but they were happy tears. "Go find your cowboy and your horse," Clara said, hugging her tight, "and write to me when you have good news. I want to hear every romantic detail." The journey east felt longer than the trip west had, maybe because Caroline's heart was racing ahead of the stage, already at the Harrison Ranch, already in Reed's arms. She tried to manage her expectations, reminding herself that 3 months had passed, that Reed might have changed his mind, that she might arrive to find him politely friendly but no longer interested in anything more. But late at night, Lying under the stars at various camping spots, Caroline allowed herself to hope. To imagine Reed's face when he saw her, to picture Rosie's joyful whinny, to dream about a future that included both the cowboy and the horse who had somehow become tangled together in her heart. She reached the town nearest the Harrison Ranch on a Tuesday afternoon, tired and dusty and nervous. She asked directions to the ranch and was told it was about 15 miles northeast. One of the shopkeepers offered to let her hire a horse for $1, which Caroline paid, though it left her with very little money. The ride to the ranch felt surreal. Everything looked familiar from her previous visit: the rolling hills and distant mountains, the particular quality of light as the sun began its descent. Caroline's hands were shaking by the time the ranch buildings came into view. She saw Reed before he saw her. He was in one of the corrals, working with a young horse, his movements patient and sure. And beside the corral, watching from the fence, stood Rosie. Caroline's heart felt too big for her chest. She nudged her hired horse faster, and Rosie's head came up immediately, ears pricked forward. The mare whinnied, loud and insistent, and Reed turned to see what had disturbed her. For a moment he just stood frozen, staring at Caroline as if she might be a mirage. Then he was moving, vaulting over the corral fence with athletic grace, striding across the yard. Caroline slid off the horse and met him halfway, and then she was in his arms and he was spinning her around, and they were both laughing and maybe crying a little too. "You came back," Reed said, his voice rough with emotion. "I was starting to think I would never see you again. I promised I would write. I keep my promises. You are here. Actually here." Reed set her down but did not let go, his hands framing her face like she was something precious and fragile. "Caroline, I have been going crazy waiting for you. Every day I checked for letters. Every night I dreamed about this moment, and now you are actually here and I cannot quite believe it. Believe it." Caroline put her hands over his, holding him to her. "I am here and I am not leaving, not unless you send me away. Never." Reed kissed her, and it was different from that first kiss by the stage, deeper and more certain, full of promise and hope and 3 months of longing. Caroline melted into him, into this impossible reunion, into the future she had been afraid to dream about. Rosie whinnied again, insistently, and they broke apart laughing. Caroline turned to her horse and Rosie practically climbed the fence trying to reach her. Caroline rushed over, and this time she could hug her horse without the heartbreak of goodbye hanging over her. This time felt like coming home. "I have something for you," Reed said once Caroline finally stepped back from Rosie. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. "This is Rosie's ownership papers. I transferred them into your name this morning when I got your letter saying you were coming." Caroline stared at the paper, not understanding. "Reed, I cannot afford to buy her back yet. I need more time to save money." "You are not buying her. I am giving her to you. Consider it a gift, or payment for the dishwashing you have been doing to save money, or just an act of crazy love from a cowboy who cannot stand the thought of you not having the horse that clearly belongs with you." "Reed, I cannot accept this. Rosie is worth $50. And you are worth everything I have." Reed pressed the papers into her hands, closing her fingers around them. "Caroline, I bought Rosie back from the freight company because I could not stand the thought of her belonging to anyone but you. She is your horse. She always has been. I was just keeping her safe until you could come home." Caroline looked at the papers, at Reed's honest face, at Rosie watching them both with intelligent eyes. "I do not know what to say. Say you will stay. Say you will work here and let me court you properly. Say that maybe someday, if I prove myself worthy, you might consider marrying a rough cowboy who fell in love with you the moment he saw you standing by a corral looking at horses." "I already considered it," Caroline admitted, her face heating. I have been considering it for 3 months, every single day. Reed's face lit up like sunrise. Is that a yes? It is a yes to staying, to the job, to being courted. The marriage part, well, let's save that conversation for when you have known me longer than 3 days and a lot of letters. Fair enough. Reed grinned, then suddenly sobered. Caroline, I need you to understand something. I am not a rich man. I make a decent wage and I have saved some money, but I am just a ranch hand. I can give you a good life, a stable life, but not a fancy one. Caroline laughed, the sound carrying pure joy. Reed Lawrence, I just spent 3 months washing dishes in Sacramento and living in a single room with my sister. I am not looking for fancy. I am looking for real. And this, you and Rosie and this beautiful ranch, this feels more real than anything I have known in years. Ruth Harrison emerged from the house at that moment, took one look at Caroline and Reed standing close together with matching expressions of joy, and let out a whoop of delight. I knew it. I told my husband you would come back, and here you are. Ruth hurried over and enveloped Caroline in a hug. Welcome home, dear. I have had your room ready for weeks, just in case. My room, of course. I am not having you sleep in the bunkhouse with the ranch hands. You will have the small room off the kitchen, nice and private. And tomorrow we will discuss your duties and wages, but tonight we feast because Reed has been unbearable to live with for 3 months, and maybe now he will finally stop moping around like a lovesick puppy. I have not been moping, Reed protested, but his ears were red. You have been impossible, Ruth corrected. But understandably so. Now come inside, both of you. Dinner is almost ready, and I want to hear all about Caroline's journey. The next weeks passed in a blur of work and wonder. Caroline fell into the rhythm of ranch life easily, discovering that her skills with horses and general farm knowledge made her invaluable. She helped Ruth with cooking and housekeeping, but she also worked with the horses, training young ones and helping evaluate stock for purchase. The ranch hands were skeptical at first, but when they saw her work, they grudgingly accepted her as one of them. And through it all, Reed courted her with the patience and dedication he brought to everything he did. He took her riding across the ranch, showing her his favorite spots. He brought her wildflowers and spent his evenings sitting on the porch with her, talking about everything and nothing. He was never inappropriate, always respectful, but Caroline could feel the leashed desire in him, the way he held himself back. One evening, about 6 weeks after Caroline's arrival, they sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Reed had been quiet all day, and Caroline sensed something was on his mind. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. Reed turned to look at her, his green eyes serious. "I am thinking about how much I love you, how I have loved you since that first day by the stage, and how every day since then has only made me more certain. And I am thinking about how patient I am trying to be, giving you time to be sure of your feelings, but Caroline, I am running out of patience." Caroline's heart raced. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I know I proposed to rush things that night by the campfire, but it has been 4 months now, and I have not changed my mind about anything. If anything, I am more certain than ever. You are the person I want to build a life with, the person I want to wake up next to every morning and come home to every night. And if you need more time, I will give it to you. I will wait as long as you need. But Caroline, if you are ready, if you feel even half of what I feel, then marry me. Please." Caroline realized she was crying, tears of joy streaming down her face. "I do not need more time. I knew 3 months ago in Sacramento that I was going to come back here and marry you if you would still have me. I love you, Reed Lawrence. I love your kindness and your patience and the way you see the best in people. I love that you bought my horse back for me and waited for me even though you had no guarantee I would return. I love you, and yes, I will marry you." Reed pulled her into his arms, kissing her thoroughly while the sunset blazed behind them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Reed rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to make you so happy, Caroline Nash. I promise you that. You already have. Everything else is just extra." They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the local church. Clara and Thomas traveled from Sacramento with baby Jamie for the occasion, and Ruth Harrison planned a celebration that half the county attended. Caroline wore a simple blue dress that Ruth helped her sew, and Reed wore his best shirt and a new vest he had saved up for. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Reed kissed Caroline with enough enthusiasm that several of the older ladies tittered. The ranch hands had built them a small cabin on the edge of the property, just 2 rooms but sturdy and well made. It sat near a creek, with a corral for Rosie and space for more horses in the future. It was the most beautiful thing Caroline had ever seen. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, both of them a little nervous but deeply in love. Reed was gentle, taking his time, making sure Caroline felt cherished and safe. And when they finally came together, Caroline felt like all the broken pieces of her life had finally clicked into place. She was home, truly home, for the first time since her father died. The first year of marriage brought adjustments and compromises, but also profound joy. Caroline continued working with the horses, discovering she had a particular gift for training difficult animals. Word spread, and soon other ranchers were bringing their problem horses to the Harrison Ranch specifically for Caroline to work with. The extra income allowed Reed and Caroline to start saving for their own small ranch someday. Ruth became like a mother to Caroline, teaching her recipes and household skills, but also sitting with her on hard days and listening when Caroline needed to talk. Mr. Harrison proved to be a fair employer and mentor, often asking Reed's opinion on ranch decisions and paying him accordingly. Caroline and Reed spent their evenings sitting on their cabin porch, watching the sunset and talking about their dreams. Reed wanted to eventually buy his own land, raise cattle and horses. Caroline wanted to start a proper training program for difficult horses, something that could bring in steady income. Together, they planned and saved and built their future one day at a time. 18 months after their wedding, Caroline discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with equal parts joy and terror. Her own mother had died in childbirth, and Caroline could not shake the fear that history might repeat itself. Reed held her while she cried out her fears, then cupped her face gently. "Caroline, you are the strongest person I know. And you are not alone in this. I will be with you every step of the way, and so will Ruth. We are going to get through this together, and we are going to meet our baby, and it is going to be wonderful." Ruth was thrilled about the coming baby and immediately took Caroline under her wing, sharing wisdom and reassurance. As Caroline's belly grew, so did her confidence. She cut back on some of the more dangerous horsework but continued training and riding, refusing to be treated like an invalid. Their son was born on a cool October evening, after 12 hours of labor that Caroline faced with the same stubborn determination she brought to everything. Reed stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and whispering encouragement. When the baby finally arrived, healthy and howling, Caroline cried with relief and joy. They named him Thomas Reed Lawrence, Thomas after Caroline's father and Reed for his own father. Little Tommy had his father's green eyes and his mother's stubborn chin, and from the moment he was born, he was deeply loved. Watching Reed hold their son for the first time, Caroline felt a completeness she had never imagined possible. This man who had shown her kindness when she was at her lowest, who had given her back her horse and her hope, had now given her a family. Their family. Tommy was 6 months old when Mr. Harrison called Reed and Caroline into his office. The older man looked pleased about something, and Ruth was there too, practically glowing with excitement. "Ruth and I have been discussing our future," Mr. Harrison began. "We are not getting any younger, and we have been thinking about what happens to this ranch when we are gone. We have no children of our own, and this place has been our life's work. We want to see it continue to thrive." Reed and Caroline exchanged confused glances, not sure where this was going. "We want to sell you part of the ranch," Ruth burst out, unable to contain herself. "Well, not sell exactly. More like a partnership. You would buy in with work, building the place up, expanding the horse training program. Eventually, when we are too old to run things, you would take over completely." Caroline felt dizzy with shock. "Mr. Harrison, that is incredibly generous, but we cannot afford to buy even a small part of this ranch." "You are not listening, dear," Ruth said gently. "You would pay with work and commitment and dedication. James and I have watched you both for over 2 years now. We have seen how hard you work, how honest you are, how much you care about this place and these animals. You are the children we never had, and this ranch should be yours." Reed looked like he might cry. "Sir, I do not know what to say. This is more than we ever dreamed of." "Say yes," Mr. Harrison replied gruffly. "Say you will stay here and build this ranch into something even greater than it is now. Say you will give an old man the peace of knowing his life's work is in good hands." "Yes," Caroline and Reed said in unison. And then they were all hugging, and Ruth was crying happy tears. The partnership was formalized with legal papers, and Reed and Caroline threw themselves into expanding the ranch with renewed energy. Caroline's horse training program grew until they were taking in animals from all over the state. Reed's cattle operation expanded, and he began breeding horses as well, combining bloodlines to create hardy, intelligent animals perfect for ranch work. They moved into a larger house on the property when Tommy was 2, and Caroline discovered she was pregnant again. Their daughter, Clara Ruth Lawrence, was born the following spring, named for Caroline's sister and their beloved Ruth Harrison. Clara had her mother's dark hair and her father's easy smile, and Tommy adored his baby sister from the moment he met her. Years passed in a blur of work and family and deep contentment. Mr. Harrison passed away peacefully in his sleep when Tommy was 8, and Reed and Caroline found themselves fully in charge of the ranch. Ruth stayed on, helping with the children and the household, still the heart of the operation even as she slowed down. Caroline often found herself reflecting on that desperate day in Stillwater, when she had sold Rosie for stage fare. If someone had told her then that selling her horse would lead to finding the love of her life, building a successful business, and creating a family she adored, she would never have believed them. But life had a funny way of working out, of taking desperate moments and transforming them into something beautiful. Rosie lived to the grand old age of 24, spending her final years in peaceful retirement in the pasture behind Reed and Caroline's house. When she finally passed, Caroline cried like she had lost a member of the family, because in many ways she had. Reed helped her bury Rosie on a hill overlooking the ranch, and they planted wildflowers on her grave. "She brought us together," Caroline said, holding Reed's hand as they stood by the fresh grave. "If I had not sold her, if you had not bought her back, none of this would have happened." "I think we would have found each other somehow," Reed replied, "but I am grateful to her all the same. She was a good horse, and she loved you well." Tommy and Clara grew into capable young people who loved the ranch as much as their parents did. Tommy inherited his father's way with cattle and his mother's skill with difficult horses. Clara proved to have a head for business, managing the finances and contracts with an acumen that impressed everyone. When Ruth Harrison passed away at the age of 83, Caroline grieved deeply for the woman who had become her second mother. But Ruth had lived a long, full life, and she died knowing the ranch she loved was in excellent hands. Caroline and Reed added a third child to their family when Caroline was 35, a surprise baby boy they named James Harrison Lawrence. Little James was the joy of everyone's life, doted on by his older siblings and his parents alike. The ranch prospered under Reed and Caroline's management, becoming known throughout the region for quality horses and cattle. But more than that, it became known as a place of fairness and integrity, where workers were treated well and deals were made with handshakes because everyone knew the Lawrences kept their word. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Reed woke Caroline before dawn and led her out to the corral. There stood a beautiful bay mare, young and strong, with lines that reminded Caroline achingly of Rosie. "I bought her from a rancher in Kansas," Reed explained. "She is 3 years old, Rosie's great-granddaughter through one of the foals we sold years ago. I tracked down her bloodline specifically. I thought maybe you could train her, and she could be yours the way Rosie was." Caroline approached the mare slowly, and the horse nickered softly, already responding to the calm energy Caroline projected. "She is beautiful. What is her name?" "Whatever you want to call her, she is yours." Caroline thought for a moment, then smiled. "Hope. I will call her Hope, because that is what you gave me 20 years ago, Reed Lawrence. Hope when I had none, a future when I thought I had lost everything. You gave me back my horse, and you gave me yourself, and you gave me this life I love." Reed pulled Caroline close, kissing her temple. "You gave me all of that too. I was just a cowboy drifting from ranch to ranch, and then I met you, and suddenly I had a reason to stay still. A reason to build something lasting." They stood together in the early morning light, watching Hope explore her new corral, and Caroline reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From desperate beginnings to this moment of complete contentment, every choice had led them to each other. Their children gave them grandchildren in time. Tommy married a sweet woman from town and had 3 children of his own. Clara surprised everyone by falling in love with a traveling horse trader, and they split their time between the ranch and the road, always bringing interesting horses back for Caroline to evaluate. James stayed on the ranch, eventually taking over the day-to-day operations as Reed and Caroline eased into a well-earned semi-retirement. On their 40th wedding anniversary, Reed and Caroline sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the sky the same colors it had that first evening when Reed had proposed. They were gray-haired now, lined with age and weather, but their hands still fit together perfectly. "Do you ever regret it?" Reed asked. "Leaving Sacramento, taking a chance on a cowboy you barely knew?" Caroline laughed, the sound rich with years of happiness. "Not for a single second. You were the best gamble I ever took, Reed Lawrence. Even better than training that crazy stallion that nearly kicked you last year. Much better than that." Caroline squeezed his hand. "You gave me back my horse, Reed, and then you gave me everything else. How could I ever regret that? I love you, Caroline. Just as much today as I did 40 years ago. More, maybe, because now I know every story, every scar, every dream you have ever had. And I love you. Thank you for waiting for me. Thank you for seeing something worth waiting for when I was just a desperate woman selling her horse for stage fare. You were never just anything. You were everything from the moment I saw you." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began appearing, the same stars that had witnessed their first conversations all those years ago. Around them, the ranch hummed with life, their children and grandchildren close by, the horses content in their pastures, years of hard work and love manifest in every building and fence line. Caroline thought about that girl she had been, standing outside the Wells Fargo office in Stillwater, making the hardest decision of her young life. If she could go back and tell that girl what was coming, the joy and love and family that waited on the other side of heartbreak, would she? But no, Caroline decided. Some journeys needed to be taken blind on faith alone. The not knowing was what made the finding so sweet. She had traded her horse for passage west. A cowboy had bought it back and given her both the horse and himself. And in doing so, he had given her a life beyond her wildest dreams, a love story better than any she could have imagined. As the sky darkened and Reed's hand remained steady in hers, Caroline smiled. 40 years of marriage, 6 grandchildren, a thriving ranch, and a love that had never wavered. Not bad for a desperate gamble made in a dusty Missouri town so long ago. Not bad at all. The ranch would continue long after they were gone, Caroline knew. Their children would carry it forward, and their grandchildren after them. The Lawrence Ranch would stand as a testament to what could be built when two people found each other at exactly the right moment and chose, every single day, to keep choosing each other. And somewhere in the pasture, Hope the mare whinnied softly, a sound of contentment that carried on the evening breeze. The horses knew, Caroline had always believed. They understood about love and loyalty and coming home. She had found her home and it had found her. And that made all the difference.